Okay, welcome to chapter 15, the special senses. We have several special sensory organs and therefore senses, which include vision, taste, smell, hearing, equilibrium. Okay, so you can see the screen right now, of course. You're able to taste your food. You can smell your food. You can hear my voice, and you are balanced, meaning you're not dizzy, right? That's because you have equilibrium. And these are your special senses that keep the human body in balance, or at least in part. Now, we have specialized sensory receptors, and their job is to detect stimuli coming from the outside world and also from inside of the body. So we have, I'm going to start with these interoreceptors, and their job is to detect any changes in your body that occur inside. Okay, for example, your blood pressure, if it goes up or down, we have specialized receptors that are ready to detect this and then act through homeostasis to restore homeostasis through a negative feedback loop. Okay, and then the next thing is another example is blood volume. Your blood volume is directly connected with your blood pressure, your blood pH. So we need to keep our blood pH at about 7.35 pH. And so we have interoreceptors that are designed to make sure that everything is at homeostasis at all times. Now, on the outside, we have something called exteroreceptors that detect stimuli coming from your external environment, such as your taste, your sense of smell, your ability to see, your ability to hear, and your ability to remain balanced at equilibrium. So typically, these receptors have a direct correlation with your central nervous system, and therefore your nervous system is directly involved. Okay, so the different types of receptors that we have chemoreceptors, photoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors. Now, without knowing anything, just look at the name, chemo. Okay, very clearly is in reference to the fact that these respond to chemical changes such as taste. Things that you eat are sensed by chemical receptors, because food and things that you smell, odors, are on a molecular level detected, right? And then we have blood changes in blood pH. This is all chemical, so we have chemoreceptors that can detect these things like this. Okay, then we have photoreceptors. Whenever you hear the word photo, I want you to think of light, photosynthesis. But in this case, we're talking about photoreceptors that are specifically and directly involved with your vision. Okay, mechanoreceptors. Mechano means mechanical, right? And so something mechanical is going to be physical. And things that are physical are hearing. And the reason why is because sound travels in waves. And even though we can't see these waves, these sound waves, they do exist. And they do exert a mechanical force. Okay, gravity, motion, your body position. Your mechanoreceptors are designed to keep your ears balanced. To keep you balanced via your ears through gravity. That's part of your equilibrium. Okay, hearing is part of being able to hear correctly is part of your equilibrium. But your body positioning, when you turn your head to the left, right, down, and up, when you move around, you don't get dizzy, right? Because your body has these receptors and is so intelligent that it's already ready for it. It knows how to keep you balanced. And in part, it's due to these guys, mechanoreceptors, that exert are stimulated by mechanical force. Thermo, what does thermo mean? That one's easy. Okay, these guys are designed to detect changes in temperature. Here's just a quick glance at the type of receptors that we're going to be talking about. The rods and cones, for example, and these unique vision receptors, unique receptors for hearing, unique receptors for smell, taste, touch. All right, now the first organ that we're going to talk about out of the sensory organs is the eye and vision. Now, 70% of the body's sensory receptors are inside of your eyes. That's a lot of receptors. Now, half of the cerebral cortex, which is the largest portion of your brain, is involved in visual processing. So this is the cerebral cortex. We have the frontal lobes, the two frontal lobes, the parietal lobes, the two temporal lobes, the occipital lobe, which is directly involved in processing visual information. In fact, if someone, let's say, I don't know if you guys ever heard about that baseball player that got hit in the back of the head with a baseball and it made him blind. This is why. Because the occipital lobe of your brain is responsible for processing the information of the eye, which technically your eyes would be where? They would be over here, right? So all the way on the opposite side of where your eyes are is the processing center of vision. Okay, your eyeball's a small spherical organ. We can only see about 1/6 of it because, of course, it's inside of your eye socket. Now, we do have accessory structures of the eyeball, and we're going to talk about those and how they contribute to your ability to see and protect, and how they protect your eye and how they assist with vision. Okay, let's go ahead and start with, we're just going to jump right in. First thing is the eyebrows. Now, the eyebrows, they lie over your supraorbital margins, right? And ultimately, their job is to shade the eye from sunlight and prevent sweat or perspiration from getting into your eye. Okay, then your eyelids, obviously, they protect the ball itself. And then we have something called conjunctiva. Now, conjunctiva is this transparent mucus that lubricates the eyeball. Okay, and then we have something called the lacrimal apparatus, which has something called the lacrimal gland, and we're going to take a look at that. This is the lacrimal gland, and its job is to produce your human tears. So it's right there. The eye muscles. We have 6 strap-like intrinsic eye muscles. 4 of them are rectus muscles. 2 of them are oblique muscles. And of course, because of the fact that these are muscles, we need to talk about their origin. They originate at the bony orbit. They insert onto the eyeball. Okay, now, why are these so important? Because these assist you with allowing you to move your eye around, and they keep your eye in place. And in fact, there are people that have issues with some of these muscles. They're not strong enough, and they'll go a little cross-eyed from time to time. So these muscles are incredibly important. All right, so they enable the eye to follow moving objects. They maintain your shape and they hold it in the orbit so that your eye's not moving all over the place. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the eye muscles. We have 4 rectus and 2 oblique. We have our superior rectus muscle, our inferior rectus muscle. Let's take a look at where exactly that is. Superior rectus muscle. Okay, that means it's on top of the eye. Inferior rectus muscle is going to be on the bottom of the eye. The medial rectus muscle is closer to the midline. The lateral rectus muscle is lateral to the eyeball. Okay, so what do these muscles do? Okay, these muscles are responsible for your ability to move your eyes left, right, up, down, right? Okay, so what else do we have here? We have 2 oblique. Superior oblique muscle. And then we have the inferior oblique, which is not in this picture, but it's in this picture. So this is the inferior oblique wrapping around just like that. All right, now the next thing I want to talk about is the muscles and their actions and what they're doing. So we'll start from the very top. Okay, the lateral, actually, we're going to start, what I meant by top is the top of this, okay, this list. So follow along with this list. Lateral rectus, okay. The lateral rectus is going to move the eye laterally. Now what we're looking at here is your right eye, okay. So lateral rectus is going to move the eye this way. Okay, medial rectus will move this way. Superior rectus allows you to look this way. Inferior oblique and inferior rectus. I'm sorry, just inferior rectus is going to allow you to basically depress your eye and turn it to the side medially. Okay, now let's talk about these obliques. Well, we can see the inferior oblique, and it interacts with the inferior rectus a little bit, but ultimately, and they are controlled by the same nerve, so that's no surprise there. Actually, all of them are except the lateral rectus and the superior oblique. They have different nerves that control them. Now, the inferior oblique muscle helps you elevate your eye and it assists in the lateral rotation. Okay, the superior oblique, which is not in this picture, depresses the eye. This is the superior oblique over here. Okay, it's going to depress the eye, meaning it's going to allow you to, it's going to let the eyeball relax downwards. These ones will allow the eyeball to elevate slightly. All right, so you want to know the muscles, the actions, the nerves controlling them. Now, we have cranial nerves. We have 12 cranial nerves, and the ones that are directly involved with the eye movement, these are some of them. Okay, the oculomotor, the trochlear nerve, and the appendix nerve. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the structure of the eyeball. To go through the structure of the eyeball, I like to start from the outside in and give the anatomy. And then we'll go through each particular structure and talk about its job. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this eye and we're going to take a look at the structures because these structures are It's the eye anatomy. Now, from the outside in, see how they've cut these layers? Now, I want you guys to pay close attention to this particular anatomy, and I'm going to post something for you guys with a blank eye, and I want you to fill it out and practice, 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 and know this inside and out. From the outside in, that we have the sclera. The sclera is all of this white region right here. Okay. The next layer. Now remember, again, we're going from the outside this way in. It's going to go something like that in regards to anatomical structural order. Sclera is the outermost layer. And this little thin layer right here, that's called the choroid. And then the inner eye is in yellow here, is a layer called the retina. Okay, see this space? Zoom in even further. See that dark, shadowy space? This is called the macula lutea. Okay, and then right in the center is called the fovea centralis. We're going to talk about those things. So keep these terms on the forefront of the brain. These will go together. Now notice this. It's huge nerve, huge. This is your optic nerve. It connects your eyes directly to your brain. What else is in here? Arteries, veins. Your eyes need a constant blood supply. Okay, we also have something that we refer to as a blind spot. And we'll talk about, and that's actually right here. Very small, but it's there. Probably about this, let's see, about this big. That's how it should be. Okay, that's your blind spot. We'll talk about why it's called a blind spot. Now I'm going to zoom out and let's take a look at what else is left. Okay, we're going to follow the sclera all the way around, and I want you to notice this. The sclera turns into the cornea. See all of this? This is your cornea. So the sclera on both sides turns into the cornea. Now, what's behind that cornea? Let's try to move these structures out of the way. There we go. Okay, so here's the cornea. Okay, and then we have right behind the cornea, we have the lens. See this lens? It's not completely flat, nor is it completely circular. It's kind of oval shaped. Okay, and now in the center, see this space, this empty space? That's the pupil. And then outside, basically where your eye color is, that's the iris. Now we're going to talk about the function, in upcoming slides, but now I just want you to know the anatomy. Now there's more. Inside the eye, we keep going. Okay, if we keep going through here, see all of this? What takes up the majority of your space is this sac that is filled with something called vitreous humor. It is this fluid, and it's enclosed in this membrane. Okay, now this is filled with vitreous humor right there. Okay, now look at this part. In the front, this part is called the aqueous humor. That is the fluid that's in there, in that anterior segment. It's referred to as the aqueous humor. Okay, now let's see what else is significant here. Oh, of course, the ciliary body, which contains those muscles right there. Body, body. Okay, and then we also have the sclera venous sinus, this little tiny guy right there. Excellent. Now, the anatomy is incredibly important, and I want you to just learn it, learn every single structure, and then now we're going to go through the functions, starting with the lens. The lens, its job is to separate the internal cavity into anterior and posterior segments, which we just saw. This is the anterior segment. Okay, this is the posterior segment way back here. And the lens is the guy in the middle, right there. Okay, it's definitely held together by these little tiny ligaments, connects it to the ciliary body. See all of these ligaments? They're holding on to the lens. The walls of the eye we have gone through. They do have a fibrous layer, a vascular layer, that's true, and an innermost layer, and then that cavity is filled with the vitreous humor and aqueous humor, the internal cavities. Okay, let's go to the next, cornea. All right, the cornea is all of this. I'm going to trace around the cornea. This is the cornea. Excellent. Now our cornea is transparent, and it takes up about a sixth. It's about a sixth of fibrous tissue. It forms this perfectly clear window which allows light to enter, and this is even more important than the entrance of light. It bends the light as it enters, creating the perfect ability for us to see. The sclera, now our sclera, all of this white, right, it's to protect the eyeball. It shapes the eyeball. It anchors those muscles that we talked about, and it allows the exit of the optic nerve. So at some point, all of this has to end. We have to connect to the brain, and the sclera encases the optic nerve. It's continuous with something called the dura mater of the brain. Our ciliary bodies here. All right, now the choroid itself becomes the ciliary bodies. So if you follow the choroid, see how it turns into the ciliary bodies over here? Follow this backwards, that's the choroid. Ultimately, this choroid is nice, thick tissue that surrounds the lens, and it allows us to allows the body to control the shape of the lens, to contract it if it needs to. It controls the ciliary muscles. Okay, inside we have something called the ciliary processes that release and secrete fluid to basically nourish the anterior portion of your eyeball. We also have a area right here where all the ligaments are that is designed to hold the lens in place, which I mentioned earlier, but it's called the ciliary zonule. The iris is the colored part of your eye, and it lies right in between the cornea and the lens. There's the iris. Your pupil. Your pupil is the central opening, and it also regulates how much light can come through. So that's important, because when there is when light's too bright, there has to be an adjustment, right? Your eyes will adjust to the light that you are able to process. So basically, there has to be some type of curvature, some type of regulation of bending of light, these types of things. So that makes sense, right? Now, this central opening can change, right? Your pupils can dilate and they can contract depending on how much light is allowed to enter at that time. All right, now, in order for us to focus on things that are far away, objects that are near and far, we need this lens to be able to bend for us, curve a little bit. And this is only possible because of those ciliary muscles. So this whole thing basically controls and helps us see near and far. This is a real eye, and it's nice to be able to see an eye like this or dissect an eye like this. This is the human eye. We usually dissect a cow eye or a sheep eye, but we're online, so we're just using pictures. But you can clearly see the ciliary body, for example, right there, and the processes. You can clearly see the lens. You can clearly see all of this vitreous humor right here. This is all just filled with that vitreous humor. You could see the retina a little bit. You can see the choroid better. The sclera is pretty clear. Obviously, the cornea is very visible. Iris is slightly visible. The pupil's just that space, and basically the rest of the anatomy we've gone through. Now, I do want to emphasize the next slide. Your eyes have to basically control the light, or how much light is going to come in, by either dilating or contracting. And so what ends up happening is we have sphincter muscles that can contract to decrease the size of the pupil. This is controlled by your parasympathetic nervous system. And then we have a dilator muscle that allows your pupils to dilate and increase in size. And they will do so depending on the visible light in your region. The retina is absolutely fascinating. Okay, so let's start with the retina. Some basics about the retina. Now, this is no surprise. The retina is an outpocketing of the brain, no shocker there. Now, what's interesting here is that it holds millions of photoreceptors, millions. And these photoreceptors transduce light. Okay, it also has neurons, it has some glia cells, and it has two membranes. An outer pigmented membrane, which means it has color, and an inner membrane. All right, let's take a look. Now, this is the inner membrane, okay, and then we've already seen the outer membrane, the retina. The pathway of light. How are you able to see, in other words? So light comes through here, and it is picked up by photoreceptors. Okay, now we're going to zoom in on that. See this little box? They've zoomed in on that area, and let's take a closer look. Okay, so we can see that we can see the retina. Okay, that inside layer. Okay, we can also see this other layer, the neural layer. We can see the pigmented colored layer. Okay, and notice that if I zoom in even closer, See all these funny looking structures? These are your receptors. This is what allows you to see. Okay, so this lines your entire retina. The only place in the eye where there are no photoreceptors is right here. And that's only because of the optic nerve. And this is why we have a blind spot, because there's no photoreceptors here. Now, in continuation with the retina, the retina processes color vision, allows us to have color vision. It is able to adapt itself to the variety of light intensities that we come across throughout the day and perceive full images. The layers of the retina, the outer layer and the innermost layer, are incredibly significant. The outer layer, the pigmented layer, absorbs excess light. The innermost layer is going to have actually 3 layers in the inner layer. Okay, so the first are the photoreceptors, the rods and cones. The next layer is the bipolar layer. Bipolar just means that they have bipolar neurons here. That means they have 2 poles, one pole here, one pole here. This is a bipolar neuron. And then the next layer is called the ganglion cell layer. And all that means is that it literally has fibers of neurons that combine together, and together they form the optic nerve, and that's the ganglion layer. So light rays have to pass through all of those layers, and then they will get picked up by the rods and cones. Now let's talk about the photoreceptors, the first layer. The rods and cones are called that because of the way they look. Under the microscope especially, rods look like a rod, and cones do indeed look like a cone. Rods, they can process dim light. They allow you to have peripheral vision. They're quite numerous, more than cones. They're sensitive to light that comes through, more than cones. However, they do not process color vision, nor do they process sharp images. Cones, on the other hand, can pull or process bright light, high resolution color vision, and on top of that, we have what's called, we saw this earlier, the macula lutea that contains the cones. So really, it's right around here where I have this arrow, okay? And then that little pit, the fovea centralis, contains all our cones. So this is where the best visual activity is in your eye. Now, if I were to ask you a vision pathway, technically this is the correct order. Light, let's look down here. Light would pass through. Let me grab an arrow and we're going to take a look down here. See this eye? Look at the pathway of light. All right, so it has to go through the cornea. Then it'll pass through the iris, then the retina. Now, once it hits the retina, it's going to go through the photoreceptor layer, the bipolar layer, the ganglion cell layer, and then to the optic nerve, which connects right to the brain. Now, that optic nerve is quite large, quite significant, quite important. And once again, I want to just emphasize this. The small region where we merge into this optic nerve and these blood vessels, and there's no rods and cones, that is your blind spot because of the simple fact that there are no rods and cones. So we do have two sources of blood supply. Now we're on the inner layer of the retina, okay? We have two sources of blood supply. Now that's good. We need tons of arteries and veins. Your eyes need a constant supply of blood. So therefore we do have we have a system for that. So let's start with the fact that the choroid supplies the outer 1/3 of photoreceptors, right? Then inside, we have something called the central artery. Now, do you see this big artery right here? This is huge, big, inside your eye. Look at these arteries, they're huge. The central artery and the vein are coming right out of that optic disc, that space, right, where there's no rods and cones. And what their job is to deliver oxygen to every single cell, nutrients, nourish every single cell, every neuron, and then of course to take away all of the veins are going to take away CO2, waste products, and therefore we have this very complex system of arteries and veins that supply the inner eye. This information is nothing surprising, okay? So that central artery is going to, and the vein, will supply the inner 2/3. Ultimately, these vessels are visible. We can see them. We can look in the mirror and see some of them, right? Okay. Now, disorders of the eye are pretty terrifying, actually. Retinal detachment. So this is a normal retina, right? Let's take a look here. Okay, normal retina. Okay, it looks nice and healthy. You can see the central area. You can see all the veins, arteries, and then see how the retina is, how it seems like it's slid down, or the veins and arteries have slid down, and that's because it's detached, which is incredibly dangerous. All right, this is an example of cataracts, a normal eye versus a cataract eye where everything's going to be a little foggy. Glaucoma is similar in that regard, and color blindness. So in normal vision, this should be various shades of orange, right? And then this is green, and it's making a number 3. Partially colorblind people would see this picture here, and this is what they would see. It would look different. Those greens would be processed in this kind of bluish gray shade, but to be completely colorblind, everything looks like this. Well, I mean, it's black and white. Okay, that is the end of part 1, the eye. Please review your chapter, and I will see you guys in the next lecture, which will be chapter 15, part 2.